Hello and welcome to the August edition of GRIDtalk by Method Grid. So today we are joined by One Advisory and we are learning all about why One Advisory chose Method Grid. But before we get into our main topic of conversation, let's learn about Method Grid. So Method Grid quite simply is a AI-empowered knowledge and project management platform. But beyond being a software provider, we are also really passionate about forming a community of AEC, P3M, and consulting professionals that want to lead the way in revolutionizing the industry. So GRIDtalk really enables that for us because it gives us an opportunity to share our knowledge, share best practice, and get into some really interesting topics of conversation. So our previous episodes have covered things like building world-class playbooks, getting into the really interesting topic of AI, but also featuring industry experts and clients as we have today. If you'd like to catch up on any of our previous episodes, please do pop over to our website, and in the resources section you will see all of the episodes are there available on demand. So our next episode of GRIDtalk is navigating the sea of change with our partner in the financial services sector, Altus. So we all know the challenges that change management can bring, and it's definitely one not to miss. So joining me on the call today, we have my friend and colleague, Pip. Pip, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi everyone. Yeah, I'm Pip Morpeth. I'm the head of professional services at Method Grid.
And most of you will probably know me, but my name is Rachel Leary, and I head up the customer success team for Method Grid. So following on the implementation, you will land with me and my team, and we will take care of you throughout the contract with Method Grid, ensuring that you understand and use all of our new features and enhancements, and of course, making sure that you get the most out of Method Grid and the services that we offer. Now, the star of the show today is, of course, Angie. Angie, would you like to introduce yourself?
Thank you, Rachel. So yeah, my name is Angie Boothroyd. I am an associate director at One Advisory, and we are a professional services firm. We provide company secretarial, governance and compliance services, as well as financial services to mainly to listed clients, either listed on AIM or listed on the main market of the London Stock Exchange. We are based in London, and we are delighted to be here today. As you know, I'm a massive Method Grid fan, so thank you for having me.
Thanks so much. We're delighted to have you. So before we get into our main topic of conversation here, let's just delve into a little bit of what we do at Method Grid. So when we are approached by prospective clients, 90% of the time, the pain point that we hear is this one. The cost of poor and inconsistent service delivery is too high. So I'm sure for most of you that are watching today, points 1 to 8 will be fairly familiar to you. So why is this the case? Why is this financial and human cost so high? The points that we mostly see are these ones that you can see laid out here. So your method clarity. Do you have a consistent method for your team to be able to use during delivery? And also, over and above that method, do you have the resources to go along with it? And are they all easy to find? Oftentimes the answer will be, yeah, we have great IP. We have a methodology, but where is it? It's in the DMS. It's somewhere in there. We're not sure how to find it or if it's easy to use, which then really leads into that method compliance. Are your team using the methodologies that they should? Are they using those resources? And can you track that? Can you see that your users are being compliant? Which then leads us into people capability. So we want to ensure that we are enabling our people to be the best that they can be. So are we giving them the right opportunities? Are we giving them the best resources that are based at their level. Of course, lots of people have different experiences, different job titles with delivery. So are we really enhancing them with all of the resources that they need to deliver their best work? And these three pillars are what we call capability uplift. So this is what we really help to improve on. Then, of course, the fourth pillar being residual risk. Now, there's always going to be residual risk when it comes to delivering projects and services. But are we doing everything we can to mitigate that risk? Do we have assurance and auditing capabilities available to us to ensure that we're doing everything that we can there? So that is really where MetaGrid comes into play. So by using the MetaGrid platform, along with the support from our professional services team, who are real experts in capability uplift, it gives you the opportunity to build out world-class playbooks and methodologies. Now, using the platform, you can then clone these methodologies to use in individual delivery instances. But we all know that forcing people to use specific methodologies, capsulating them in that little box, doesn't work. It leads to non-compliance because actually this particular part doesn't really fit with what I'm trying to deliver. This doesn't really work with my particular client. So we have ensured that these are super customizable. When you've cloned out your playbook, you can then customize it for that specific service that you're delivering. But not only that, you can right size it for your specific client. Then we get into delivery. And of course, we have the ability to then assure all of those projects. Now, this is with high-level progress tracking to ensure compliance, but also with deep dive analytics. So we can ensure that we're mitigating that risk and that we're then learning from all of those deliveries that we are seeing. So that then enables us to ever improve. We can then enhance on those original enterprise-level playbooks, making sure that they are continuously improving and that we are giving the best possible service we can. So on that note, I would love to hand over to you, Angie, to tell us a little bit more about One Advisory.
Yeah, so One Advisory is a firm we've got two departments. One is company secretarial governance and compliance. So that's the team that I'm part of. And what we do is we work with companies we work with companies who are either about to be IPOing on one of the London stock markets, or they have already IPO'd, or they may have already been listed for a long time, and they just want to either switch to a different COSAC service provider, or they might have some other reason that they need to make a change, and then we come in. So generally, we provide a fully outsourced company secretarial service to a lot of companies. So about I think probably 30 listed companies now, and then there are further several companies that we just provide sort of ad hoc or more of a limited scope of support to. So basically, we help company secretarial teams, CFOs, boards of directors, to make sure all their governance and compliance is in good shape, whatever stage of their business life cycle they're at. And we've also got our financial reporting team. So they do a lot of work for companies that are preparing for IPO, converting all their accounts to the required format, working with us to get all the governance procedures in place, and then after IPO, helping them with their financial reporting requirements. So we do a lot of work with lots of companies in the city, obviously, and a lot of companies that are quite new, or companies that have been around for a long time who are going through some sort of change.
Fantastic. So looking into the MetaGrid One Advisory journey, I'm aware that you knew about MetaGrid before you even joined One Advisory. But when you were in situ and things started to move along, what was the real need for looking for a new software provider? I know that you had Monday.com in place already for your task management. So how did MetaGrid even come up in conversation?
Well, I tell you how it came up in conversation. One of the things I always ask whenever I mean, it's something I'm already thinking about at interview stage when I go into a new place. I often ask, how do you organize your knowledge so that you're delivering
Mm,
things consistently? And most places, to be fair, I mean, it's a really difficult thing to do. And I knew that at One Advisory, although they had really good systems in place, really good procedural notes, and a really good culture of following those,
mm,
but they knew they could do better. And um, to me, the most frustrating thing of just having loads of process notes in folders on your drive, which is what pretty much everybody does. I mean, that's just what you see absolutely everywhere. It's all sort of grouped into
mm,
folders by subject, and then you've got all your process notes or guidance notes, or, oh, here's an article, here's a draft, here's something I did for a client, maybe copy, just loads of random stuff. But the biggest problem is that it's not searchable. Not well, it is, but really slowly. You know what it's like when you're in Explorer and you search for something, and then you say search file
sure.
contents, and then it takes 10 times longer. So that I've always found really frustrating, and I just thought there must be a better way, surely. So so I mentioned to One Advisory, I said, is it okay if I kind of have a look at this, because I've kind of got some ideas for how we might be able to make this better. That's how the whole conversation started.
So really the crux of it is you were looking at this from a knowledge management perspective purely at that point. So
Correct.
I imagine that MethodGrid was not the only software provider that you were looking at that time. Is that right?
Yeah, right. Obviously, to put a credible business case forward, although that in my heart of hearts, I really wanted to go with MethodGrid. I did. Obviously, it would have been irresponsible of me not to investigate all the other options and present those to the directors. So
Of
yes.
course. So over and above you being a MethodGrid fan anyway, was there anything from a knowledge management perspective that really made MethodGrid stand out from the other providers that you were looking at?
I think it's completely different from all the other providers. I would sort of there's several other providers that I would put all in one bucket. They all have a very similar user experience and very similar functionality. MethodGrid is just completely different from anything else on the market. I mean, there's nothing. It's a completely different system, and um, it's much more customizable. It's very deep. It's got you do just, as soon as you start using it, you just get loads of ideas about, oh, we could do this, and we could do this, and we could do this. So I think what really appealed to me was just this whole grid interface. I find
Mm-hmm.
mirrors the way I think about things personally. I I know
Okay.
that might not be the same for everybody, but I'm a very visual learner, and I always think about things in diagrams. If I'm talking to somebody about anything, I always have to start drawing, diagrams and grids and, flow charts and things. So
Sure.
it just spoke to my way of thinking. And I think what I really liked is how there was a huge opportunity to. What I wanted was for the knowledge, just for people to have access to everything at their fingertips, all the knowledge
Mm-hmm.
they needed, be that documents, web links, templates, links to other grids, links to other elements, links to, or whether it's, actual text or other information that's brought into MethodGrid directly. There's just, I guess it's a very rich sort of, what am I trying to say? You can do a lot of different things with it. It's very multimedia, you can put videos,
Yeah.
you can have all sorts of different types of content in there. And so I thought from a sort of future proofing perspective, it just makes it feel like there's a lot of scope for development.
Amazing and high praise indeed. Thank you. So obviously I touched on the fact that you at the time were using Monday.com for your task management, and there was no real need for you to be replacing Monday. That wasn't the intention. However, it did come about that you did replace Monday.com. Can you tell me a little bit about what was the moment that you thought actually MethodGrid possibly could do everything and be the one all-encompassing platform that we need? What was it that really drove you to make that change?
Well, I was presenting MethodGrid as a knowledge management tool to at a strategy day to all the directors, and that was really my sole focus. That was the sole focus of the presentation. And we sort of got to the end of it, and like 2 people turned around and just said to me, "Oh, so we could use this to replace Monday as well, couldn't we?" And I was like, "Yeah, we could." and that had kind of been bubbling away in the back of my mind as well, because I thought if we did use it to replace Monday as well. So in other words, if you think of our use of MethodGrid, it's split into two things. You've got knowledge management, and then you've got task management. So if we did use it to replace the task management side, which Monday was currently taking care of, then people could be ticking off their tasks and seeing what they have to do, but then they could click through to the knowledge base and thereby have everything they need at their fingertips. So rather than having 2 different systems, like, oh, tick off this task, then go into the knowledge management system and do the work. So it seemed very obvious to me that it would make a lot of sense to bring all of those things together. But of course, the business case for that was strong, because price-wise, it worked out for us about, it was in the same ballpark as Monday. So to have this system, so we could either spend twice as much and have two different platforms running at the same time, or we could just have MethodGrid to do everything. So
Yeah,
absolutely. It was almost a no-brainer.
Which is fantastic. To give people an idea of how you were using Monday.com and therefore what was needed to move across to MethodGrid, can you just give a little bit of insight into that use case and what it is you have built in there in terms of what tasks you were managing?
Yes. So as I said before, we have many clients. So say we've got, about 25, 30 full service clients that we provide a fully outsourced company secretarial service to. So as you can imagine, the work we do for each of those clients is quite varied. That's just the nature of our role. There's lots of different tasks that you have to be aware of at any given time, and they all have statutory or otherwise some sort of deadlines that are really important to stick to. So it's a lot to keep on top of over the course of a year. And we had a system in Monday.com whereby we would have all of those compliance tasks in a list. Somebody would set those up, whatever, a few months before the next year started, or roll the tasks over from the previous year. So you always had all of your statutory filings, all of your board meeting dates and deadlines, all of that stuff. It would all be there in Monday.com, and it would be categorized with different colors and have different people assigned to the different tasks. And it did work, and it was fine. But I never, I never completely got on with it. I don't know why that is. I think it's just because I need more of like a graphical interface. But so what we needed to do, our priority was to make sure that we got all of those compliance deadlines over onto MethodGrid and that nothing slipped through the cracks.
Absolutely. A big task in itself.
Yeah.
So the decision was made then that you would go ahead with MethodGrid, not just as a knowledge management platform, but also to manage all of your tasks. So heading into our implementation with one of our capability uplift specialists, how did you find that week-long implementation, and was there anything that was a real highlight for you in that week?
I think highlight is just, I mean, I feel like I would have been quite lost if we hadn't had that week. I think that's the best way of putting it, because so Pip came in for and spent a week with us in the office, and he just had loads of great ideas about how things would work. I think we spent a whole day just talking, just kind of brainstorming, talking about what it was that we were looking to get out of it. And then we started looking into, well, how are we going to build this? How's it going to look? How's it going to work? And I think you said this was going to happen like a couple of days in. You just get to the point where your brain slightly implodes as you realize, wait, there is a lot to think about here. And so it was pretty intense, and we did get there in the end. And by the end of the week, we pretty much had the basis of what we call our master client grid pretty much built. Tweaking details were tweaked to follow, but we had the basic concept down. And Pip's guidance was really great. He even helped with non-method grid things like SharePoint that we had to get our heads around, because before that we weren't really big SharePoint users. So I think, yeah, it's hard to say what the highlight was, other than that that it was just absolutely essential. It had to be done.
Yeah, no, Angie, I mean, it's credit to you and the team as well. I think because I know just getting to that first iteration of that client playbook for each client was quite an undertaking, and getting the logic of it for how it would work for each month, and giving teams the ability to move it around and justify it, tailor it for each client. But also what I did find good fun was designing the kind of knowledge grid that would, potentially great, and how best to do that as well, because I think we saved ourselves a lot of time by coming up with a good logic of how we'd structure and make it easier for teams to access that knowledge. And it was a great week. That was good fun.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, we went from, just to give you an idea of the scope of possibilities, first we were talking about, do we have a separate grid for every knowledge category, or do we just have one massive knowledge grid with one theme for each subject? And I think that is one of the challenges, is figuring out, what do you use tasks for, what do you use elements for, how do you scale it? Because depending how granular you want to be, that's going to inform whether something becomes an element or an entire grid, or if it's just a task within an element. All of those things required a lot of thought, but we got there in the end. And so the system that we're using now is very much based on what we came up with in that week.
So from following that week, obviously we have professional services offering where we can continue to support you following on from the formal implementation. However, you decided not to go with that, quite logically, because there was a 6-month runway between implementation and Monday.com switching off. So we had quite a lot of time to continue, building out those playbooks and also embedding it in the company. So you decided to do that with internal resource and, of course, support from your Method Grid Client Success Manager, which happens to be me. But can you tell me a little bit about what that experience was like? And also, given the opportunity to do it again, would you do anything differently?
Oh, interesting. Well, so here's my chance to make Rachel blush. Rachel is fantastic, and still is. I say was as if you're not here anymore. Rachel was and continues to be fantastic.
Thank you.
She, the volume and the level of support that we've got has been really appreciated. You really do. It feels very personal and very Method Grid are all very approachable, and I think there's quite a synergy between our business and your business, because we're similar sized businesses, you know, you don't have to go through layers and layers of corporate whatever to just speak to somebody and have a chat about stuff. It's just really nice. You know, and that's something about Monday.com. You know, you just talk to a chat bot or something. So that's been really appreciated. So Rachel's just offered us training. If we said, oh, we've got some new people joining next month, and she'd say, oh yeah, do you want me to give them some training, or do you want me to do some training for one of them and you can record it and give it to the next ones, or whatever. And lots of tailored training to both the company secretarial team and the finance team, who have their own grids. I should add, they have their own client grids. So we all kind of have access to each other's grids, but we wouldn't use them, but we do have that visibility across each client, across both teams. So the support has been far beyond what I would have expected. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
But you knew I would say that.
So in relation to continuing with the content build out specifically, moving all of that content from Monday.com, ensuring that it was obviously finished on time. There was a strict deadline when Monday.com was going to be switched off. How did that go? How was it using just internal resource for that? And as I mentioned, would you do it differently if you had the opportunity to do it again, do you think?
I think the only thing I would do is I would give myself more time. So I would have said, can we keep Monday going a little bit longer as a safety net? Because it was really rushed towards the end. But that's because we're a small business. We don't have a dedicated change management team, or, you know, we're not project managers. We're all company secretaries and governance professionals trying to do our day jobs as well as do all of this stuff. So I'm sure people in my position will understand, you know, the client work always comes first.
Absolutely.
And things get pushed to the bottom of the list. So it was very difficult to, you know, make sure that it was prioritized. But I say, yeah, I wish I would have had a couple more months, but actually, no matter how long we would have had, it would have always run up because of what I've just said. It would always be right up to the wire, I'm sure. So I think, as ever, I know people always say this, but, you know, it was more work than I thought it would be, of course, because everything always is. And I don't know, like, we could have looked into asking you guys to come in and do more of the implementation side of it. Had I known how much work it was, I could have then put a business case to my boss and said, can we get someone in to do this? Because actually I'm going to break down. But the thing is, I loved it so much that I wanted to do it all myself. So that's my problem. I probably should have got more help in.
It's something to be proud of, for sure.
Yeah.
In terms of actually building that content in, how did you find the platform itself, in terms of the interface, in terms of how easy or difficult it was to actually build out those grids? What was your experience?
It was actually easier than I thought it would be, because I think when you first, like, if anyone on this call is just like starting to look at the platform, I know it can look quite overwhelming if you're not used to it. But actually, it doesn't take long at all to get into it, and it does become very intuitive very quickly. So that was actually surprisingly easy.
And there was actually a key feature as well, I remember, throughout the process that you really won you over. But also, you know, you had some feedback for us on our search feature, and I just wonder if you could tell the audience a little bit about what that situation was and what the outcome of it was.
Yeah, so that was pretty key in getting it over the line, actually. So going back to when I was exploring various different platforms, one of my key criteria was that it had to have a really good search capability. And the other ones I looked at were like, you know, instant, you know, type a word in and boom, it just shows you, you know, the 100 or whatever instances wherever that word appears in the system. Really, and they were all quite similar. As I said, the other platforms I was looking at are all quite similar to each other, and they all had very similarly good search features. And then, so then I went to use the search. I thought, oh, I better test out to see what the search function is like in MethodGrid.
Mhm.
And it was like, oh, well, it kind of takes me to the right place, but not quite exactly. So it would take me to the element where those keywords appeared, but it wouldn't highlight exactly where they were. And then I'd find myself still looking for them. And I was like, oh, this is a bit annoying. So I thought maybe I was doing something wrong, or maybe it was a bug or something. So I spoke to Rachel about it and said, am I missing something here? Because the search function isn't really doing what I was hoping it would do. And bear in mind, I wasn't a client at this point. I was just at that stage where I was exploring it. And she took that feedback back and came back and said, well, okay, we've fixed our search function. It's great now. and then there it was. So it was massively improved as a result of my feedback, which I thought was pretty cool. And it had, had that not been the case, that could have been a real barrier to getting it over the line.
But even over and above that, making that sale is obviously what everybody is all about at the end of the day. But over and above that, it really leans into our core values as well. As you mentioned earlier, that human touch is really important to us, and building relationships with our clients is super important. So bringing that feedback to the team and having the opportunity to then come back to you and say, you know what, yeah, we've done it for you, is actually a really rewarding experience from my position as well. We really want to delight our clients as much as we possibly can. And of course, working with you, Angie, is a breeze. So getting things done for you is always an absolute pleasure. But yeah, it is a really, really core part of our value system and what we want to do. We want to make sure that we're here for you, and that feedback is always taken on board as much as it possibly can be. And we are very, very lucky to have such an extraordinary dev and product team that can react so swiftly and are so highly skilled that they can build out these feature enhancements, not only so quickly, but in such a robust and fantastic fashion. We're very, very lucky. So from May, we switched off Monday.com.
Mm-hmm.
And we went live with the task management side of MethodGrid, which was completely different from where we started. So not even touching on the knowledge management. How did that go live go? How was the engagement from the team, and where are things at now? How are you feeling about it all?
Yes, well, I think again that whole point about me doing this kind of on top of my day job does make it really challenging, because it's just hard to find the time to prioritize, and it's really important to communicate things properly and consistently to the team, and to make sure the messaging right, and the messaging is right, and the instructions are right. But that said, the adoption has been a little bit slow, but that's only because we were at an extremely busy time of our annual cycle. So it was just really weird timing. And we had all of our new trainees building out the new grids for us. But in order to get them to build out these grids, we also had to educate them about what it was that they were even building, because this was all new to them as an industry. So it was quite. And another thing I realized is that you think you've given really clear instructions, but of course, but I didn't have time to build a user guide, so I was just sort of verbally communicating all this stuff. And yeah, so some grids were built weirdly, incorrectly, probably my fault for not communicating it properly, or for just not really appreciating that those people weren't familiar with all those terminologies and that kind of thing. So there was definitely a gap there in what I expected to happen and what did happen? So it got to the stage where it was like the clock was ticking. It's like, okay, Monday's going to be switched off. Monday's going to be switched off. So we had to. It was like, the grids aren't going to be all built. Okay, so we had to. So we had to scale down our ambitions a little bit. That's the other thing. I was super ambitious. I always bite off more than I could chew. So that's just my problem. Because what I wanted to do was not just take everything that was currently being tracked on Monday.com. I also wanted to add things and make the tasks more granular and all kinds of stuff. I probably shouldn't have done that. I probably should have just said, let's just take what's on Monday and get on Method Grid and then worry about building in the detail later. So we did have to kind of pare it back at the last minute. And what we did is we downloaded spreadsheets we somehow managed to download everything from Monday.com. So we had kind of spreadsheets and things to refer to. So we could have something to compare against even after it was switched off. So yeah, so it was a bit rushed, bit scaled, had to scale down our ambitions at the last minute. And adoption wise, it's been very mixed, and I think it's getting better. But one of the biggest barriers to adoption is that I just made it too granular, and people were just overwhelmed because they had like 5,000 tasks in their inbox, and they were used to. We didn't use Monday at such a granular level. So the next iteration of the client grid that I'm working on now is a bit more high level, but with customization options. So we'll say, look, maybe for each of your board meetings, you just want to track three or four items, like getting the papers out, doing the minutes, getting the previous minutes signed, updating the matters arising, whatever. Because I had like 20 actions in advance of a board meeting, like prepare this report, get it reviewed by this person, and so people's inboxes were just overflowing. So that's a really good lesson, is that you do have to be mindful of that.
Yeah,
So we're working on
absolutely.
the next iteration now, but we did do some proper feedback. We did some proper feedback sessions, got feedback from the team. There's a lot of things that people really like about the grids. A lot of people are really using them as their go-to place to get organized. So we have some
Amazing.
really keen adopters. Then we have the other end of the scale where people think, why do I have to do this? Can't I just do my work? um,
There's
which is
always
fair
some.
enough. But yeah,
Yeah.
so it's fair enough. But we're trying to make it flexible enough so that it does work for people's different working styles.
I think, Angie, just on that, the number of implementations we've done where we've tested grids like with users before we launch is just invaluable. Getting the kind of feedback from users first before you try and deploy. Just, does that make sense? Does that kind of look realistic? And also kind of, you've witnessed it, is the aim is to try and keep it really simple and easy. And a lot of times, people will go, actually, I've got a massive element. That's everything you probably need. Try and simplify it and give them exactly what they need, and reference other links that would give them that more detail. But scenario testing, I think, with users is invaluable in building your confidence in deployment.
Yeah, I would definitely do that again, provided I had the time to do it. Yeah, it's just, I can definitely see that would be super valuable. We tested, what we did is we did sort of a phased rollout. So we tested it across just a few clients first. That's what we did, rather than doing like a dummy client thing, because, because we just do not have any spare time. Like, we had to do everything as efficiently as we could. So we're like, let's just test these on real clients, but we'll run it in parallel with Monday, so we don't drop anything.
Sure.
So we implemented feedback. So I think we rolled it out to 3 client grids or something, then took the feedback on board, updated the grid, then rolled it out to a few more clients, then took the feedback on board, updated the grid. So that's the way we did it. But that was quite tricky, because then it's like, then what happens to the grids that were the very first ones that were rolled out, and they've got like old elements in them that we've since improved, and then you have to go in and patch them up with like new elements from the latest iteration of the grid. But then, as you can probably tell, I'm not a project manager, so
But on that
learning as I
note,
go.
Angie, actually, that's a really interesting thing that you bring up, because you were quite innovative in your solution to that problem. And I wonder, especially for the current users of MethodGrid that are joining us today, can you just let them know about what I will loosely refer to as your element library that you have going?
Oh yeah, like the patch grid, I think.
The
Is
patch grid,
yeah.
yes.
Yes. So what I did then is, so obviously I've got only a few of us have access to the master grids, right? So I created a new iteration of the master, and then created a clone of the master for public consumption, and called it, patch grid version 23.2 or whatever. And then what I did is said, okay, people, for everything on this patch grid, that's got a red rag rating. Can't remember quite how I did it. I labeled them rag ratings or something. But anyway, I said for certain elements, you need to go in and replace them with these new ones from this patch grid. So you would go into the element, and then you say select from existing, and then in the search bar you just type in the word patch, because I put the word patch at the beginning of all the elements, and then it will show you all those patch elements. They'll be in alphabetical order. So if you're looking for a board meeting patch, you just type in patch, and then you go to B, board meeting, click that, and it would bring in the new element for you. Does that make sense?
It does, and I just think it's so fantastic. Obviously, the version parent-child conversation happens a lot at MethodGrid. Versioning and parent-child relationships are immensely complicated. So we will get there at some point where that will come into play as a feature, but as a fix built by a client nonetheless, I think that is just fantastic, and really, really useful, I'm sure, for a lot of people on the call, because sometimes updating those elements, especially when you have very large grids, can become quite tricky. So having a patch grid available where it draws down that existing element list, I just think that was a fantastic idea and really, really innovative. So well done, Angie.
Great. Happy to help.
So I just wonder, we have a little bit of time now. I have some quick fire questions for you, first of all. Firstly being, what, if anything, would be your favorite feature of MethodGrid?
Oh, that's like trying to make me choose between my own children now. My favorite feature is it's the grid structure itself. It's it's seeing things in a grid. That is my favorite thing.
Amazing.
I mean, that's kind of a cop-out, but that is the thing.
No, not at all. And I think it will be something that not only our CEO, but also our designer will be very happy to hear, because, that's their baby also. So
yeah,
that's great feedback. Thank you. In terms of the journey itself, so from end to end with MethodGrid so far, obviously we have a long journey ahead of us, but has there been any one key moment, key highlight for you that really stands out?
I think what really stands out for me is I remember I had sort of a complete eureka moment when I realized that it's really important to distinguish between which grids are static and which ones are dynamic. So it's really important to separate. So for example, underneath, I have a slide for this somewhere, but I don't know where it is. You've at the top, you've got your active client grids, right? And then so those are moving around all the time. Underneath, you've got your knowledge library. And what I realized is really important, that you don't put things in the client grids that are likely to ever change in terms of legislation, processes, whatever. You put all your processes, all of your legal notes, whatever, in the knowledge base, so that as and when you need to update those, you update those, and you just have a link from your active client grids to that knowledge base. So I realized actually that is really critical in the way that we think about how we structure it. And until I got to that moment, I was a bit in a muddle about exactly where everything was to sit and how things would update. So actually there's three things. There's your active grids, well, master grids and your active client grids. Then you've got your knowledge base grid. And then underneath that, you've got all of your SharePoint. So at the very lowest level, you'll be updating your actual SharePoint files so that when you open the knowledge base and you link to those will be updated. And then when you link to those from your active grids, you're going all the way down through the chain. That's really important to get right.
Yeah, and
you're an absolute expert now, Ange.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, I mean, and it's such a good point. We wrote about that in the white paper that we just sort of released about the different types of grids you can build. You know, the ones that are controlling how you deliver a service versus the ones where you just want to capture knowledge. But the trick is to stitch them and integrate them together. Yeah, so it's yeah, that's great.
Perfect. So let's jump in to open the floor up to our audience. If anyone has any questions, Pip is going to facilitate, and we're happy to answer any questions, whether it be from a MethodGrid platform perspective that I can answer for you, from the experience that One Advisory has had that obviously Angie can answer for you, or from a capability uplift perspective, which Pip can answer for you. Please feel free.
Cool. Well, I've got one from Jonathan at Altus. John, so are there any particular, probably for you, Ange, are there any particular features, capabilities that Monday provides that you want MG to build?
Yes, there is one, and that is one thing that Monday.com did was you could have a board that's like their equivalent of a grid. You could have a Monday board that mirrored elements of other boards. So say, for example, so what I would really like in MethodGrid is, for example, I would like to have a grid that's just my grid that shows me, for example, all of my board meetings that I've got coming up. So say all of this client's board meetings, all of this client's board meetings, all of this client's board meetings. So in other words, taking those elements from other grids and just showing them to me all in one place. That would be amazing. So at the moment, there's no way in MethodGrid to mirror elements, which is something that Monday.com does. You can have a pulse, as they call them, which appears in two places. And if you update it in one place, it will automatically be updated in the other because they're just mirrors of each other.
Interesting. So we get into that with the dashboards. I know obviously the dashboards is something that we are very soon to be looking at together in terms of creating out those dashboards visually for you, which hopefully will start to get into that realm and solve that issue a little bit, Angie, but definitely something to think about in terms of actually replicating full elements in a grid. Really interesting feedback. Thank you.
Got another one from Rab, which sort of suggests implementation should be run as a change project. Angie,
I suppose, like I say, I'm not a project manager. I think it sounds very sensible. I think
maybe that's one for you to take.
No, I think the bit we really focus on, if you try and treat this like a tool implementation, you'll just get a tool, and that's great. But that's kind of, I think that's Monday.com kind of level. I think if you're wanting to help build like capability, transfer it, make sure adoption is really high, but actually make significant sort of uplift in ways of working, the capability itself, you kind of have to treat it like an internal project. Otherwise, I think you really run the risk of. I mean, Angie, you've been fantastic because you've driven it through, and it's required that drive for you to enable. when, if you're like trying to manage all the you had a critical end date, you had to do something, so that kind of drove you to it. But we've seen it where, you know, if you don't have that kind of forced cut off, you can start with the best intentions and it takes longer and longer to drill, and then you kind of, whoops, your enthusiasm goes and you've just lost it. And, you know, then I think the reality is you're left with just a tool that, you know, didn't really materialize the benefits for you. And that's the key focus for us, is kind of our sort of guarantee or brand sort of promise that we try with clients is, look, we want to help you with the implementation, but we also want to make sure you get the outcomes from it. And it's how much effort we put in to sort of implementation and building out that capability for you, which is what really rewards us, I think. Yeah, we're more rewarded about leaving capability behind with clients is the sort of measure of us. Any other sort of questions from the group? I'll give them a couple of minutes. So please feel free to just use the questions section on Livestorm, just on the right-hand side.
So while we're waiting for that to come through, it might be a great idea to just have a quick look at your grids that you have built, and if you're happy to, I think the audience would be really interested to see what that looks like. Obviously, it's slightly outside of our key use case, which is, you know, project delivery, and it's more in the client management space. So it looks a little bit different to perhaps the grids that people are using day to day.
Yeah, I'll show you. What I'll show you is a basically like a blank master client grid. So I'm not obviously sharing any confidential information. Let's see. So share screen.
But yeah, Rachel, I mean, it's interesting because we've had a couple of use cases now where grids are being converted into be sort of client account management grids, helping manage the kind of client relationship within a sort of 12-month period, especially for sort of retained services.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so this is basically the hub of all of our client work now. So this is and I came up with this idea, well, together with a colleague of mine. We sort of scribbled this out on a piece of paper one day, and this is pretty much what it looked like. It just seemed like the obvious thing for us to do, because we manage our clients over an annual cycle because of the nature of what we do. It's very much based on a financial cycle, or on a financial year-end cycle, or a calendar year cycle. So what I've done is obviously divided it into months. So it is very much sort of calendar based. And then each of these themes here is just a different work stream, really. So board meetings, committee meetings, stuff to do with the financial reporting cycle and the AGM, market abuse regulation, and then all of the subsidiary entity compliance options and things like that, and then a miscellaneous bit for obviously miscellaneous. So then within each of these we have a template. Well, first of all, let me start with this. Everything in green here is guidance. So this was Pip's idea, and I think this is Pip's color scheme as well. So we have the guidance column there, where we put all our sort of management data, or key contacts and whatnot. So that gets populated, and then from then on, it's all time based. So you've got your board meeting element. I'm not going to demonstrate this now because I don't think it'll work with the screen sharing, but I've basically got an Excel calculator that calculates all of your dates in relation to your board and committee meetings, and then that populates the tasks area here. So then, yeah, you just clone those templates out across the year, and you've got each element represents I don't know, I guess a task or an event, something that's bigger than a task but not as big as
activity. There you go.
Activity. Should know this. So blue elements are activity elements, and then they go green once you've completed them. So that is, in a nutshell, the way it works. It's very, very simple, ultimately, I think, and intuitive. And then within each of those, then you get into your instructions and your different tasks associated with that activity, links to further information, and whatnot. And these are intentionally kept very simple, because of course all the real details will be when you then click into that element there. That will be your knowledge base element, which will give you all the background information, how to do a QCA government statement review. That will give you step-by-step instructions on how to do the thing. But we don't want the step-by-step instructions to be at this level.
Yeah.
That will be in the knowledge base. Does that make sense?
Definitely. And really, I mean, great. Using those labels in such a good way, and having that clear, concise workflow as well. So regardless of the fact that it isn't a standard project management grid, it still has a very clear process to it. And you can see that for an end user, especially if it was someone that perhaps has not done the process before, that it is really easy to see where you need to go and what you need to do. And everything is there at their fingertips. So I think it's been built brilliantly, Angie, and full credit to you for that.
Well, thanks. I had a lot of excellent help, and I've had great feedback from my colleagues, and obviously that is ongoing.
Just a last comment, and I think before we wrap up, and one of the questions is, obviously you can't show a client grid, but how do the teams know which task is for what client?
Oh yeah, sorry, I should have said that. I'll just quickly share again. So yeah, I didn't make that clear. So this is just a master grid, and this gets cloned out for each client. So each client will have its own master grid. So all of these tasks are for one client. This is just managing one client's activities.
Cool.
And the way that it's obviously set up for you guys as well is One Advisory have a really robust folder structure within their Method Grid account. So each of their clients has their own folder, because they also have, as Angie mentioned, the finance team as well could be working on the same client. So they will have a separate grid for finance and one for COSEC for the same client, all structured out into that folder structure, which then all becomes reportable, which is great. Perfect. Well, Angie, thank you so much for joining us. It has been an absolute pleasure speaking with you, as always. To our audience, please don't forget our next Grid Talk is with our client partners, Altus, navigating the sea of change. So please do join us, and we look forward to seeing you then.
Brilliant. Well done. Thanks, everyone. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you.